Greetings and welcome everybody to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm your host Adam Bird, and this week John's back with me. We slotted to do like 4 of these shows, I think, initially, and we've got like 10 in the can, or we're working on 10 right now. So I mean, it's absolutely crazy, but we are carrying on with our conversation of Let's Have a Conversation. Excuse me. We're carrying on our series of Let's Have a Conversation. So without further ado, John, how are you, brother?
I am doing great, Adam. I'm ready to go. This is an exciting topic tonight.
Why don't you? Well, let's dive right into it. Share with our listeners what we are talking about in this episode of Let's Have a Conversation.
Yeah. So in this conversation, we're going to be talking about the greatest threat to our civil liberties in the present day, the administrative state.
Oof.
Some people might call it the deep state. Others might call it the swamp.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
Right?
So what's the definition then of the administrative state?
Yeah, so definitions could vary, but they're all going to come back to something resembling the following. It's a body of it's an agency.
Okay,
made up of agencies for the most part, who are, of course, have people in them.
Right.
And the people are not elected. They're just hired officials. They tend to be experts. And what these agencies do is they take a statute, and as part of a statute, let's say the Clean Air Act, okay, as an example, was a statute passed by Congress. But because Congress it's ridiculous to think that Congress could sit down and agree on every fine point of what would need to be done to make air clean. And so they delegate that authority to an agency.
Okay.
And so the agency in this case was the EPA. And, well, the agency gets to define what clean air really means. They get to make rules to implement.
Right.
So they end up with legislative power because they make rules. They end up with executive power because they go out and enforce the rules. So they define what they're doing, they enforce whatever they're assigned to do, and then they are judiciary as well because they adjudicate. So if you've got an issue if you're a company and the EPA comes in and you guys have a disagreement, and you will end up going before a tribunal at the EPA, and they will rule on your issue. So they literally make the rules, enforce the rules, and adjudicate any disagreements. Now, this administrative state is not just federal; it's also at the state level, and it has grown greatly out of control. Now, that's a statement that's debatable. So from my point of view, from my classic liberal point of view, from my Jeffersonian Madison type point of view, it has grown greatly out of control. Now, there is no place in the Constitution. We have this pesky document called the Constitution that progressives, and I'm talking about older progressives, really, I'm talking about Wilson era progressives. Man, they were trying to figure out a way around this thing. So the administrative state largely grew out of the necessary and proper clause, which was kind of a weak place in the Constitution. And the question got asked, well, is it necessary and is it proper?
Right.
And decades have gone by, and we've messed with these words, and we've had thought in law and philosophy about these words, and we've engaged in constitutional interpretation. And if you take that to its nth degree, you can pretty much make anything constitutional as we break words down to fundamental meanings and take them by themselves, and rob the phrase and the clause of power. So that's kind of how it came to be. So it grew out of the progressive movement. And the progressive movement, Wilson, in his writings, even as early as 1885, is decrying these darn checks and balances that keep people like him in the knowledge class, the elite class, from implementing these things that would be so good for the world, without any consideration for the fact that those checks and balances were put there specifically to make it difficult.
Right.
Right. For anybody to say,
monopolize and to do certain things.
Right. Well, what is good? Whose idea of good? If you go back to Aristotle says that every action in the world is aiming at some good. Well, but whose version of good, right? And therein lies the question. But this has expanded over the 20th century, and now we are in a situation where the administrative state is composed in its totalness, its total population of somewhere around 20 million people.
Yeah.
So it's very large, and so it has the size where it can literally affect elections. And we've touched on some of this in prior shows. It is so large from in terms of power, because of the reasons we just stated, having all this power delegated to it by Congress, that it can work on the electorate through. Well, we've seen it happen during the COVID pandemic.
Right.
Unelected officials who wielded a tremendous amount of power, who are on TV all the time, they can change what the public thinks because they're wielding so much power.
Influencers.
And so, I mean, and we're really just kind of touching on the ultimately the amount of power and the amount of sway that the administrative state has on us. No one person is going to roll into the executive branch and be able to dismantle this thing.
No.
Because the administrative state, and these are all the various agencies, they can put the brakes on anything.
Yeah. FCC, SEC, FAA. I mean, it's all, and we've all, and I guarantee you, we've all seen it at one time. If you're listening to this, you've seen that these agencies come in and put a halt on something at some point of your life.
Yeah.
Now my question is it going to get worse? I mean, because I look at this. So we're talking about the administrative state, and I in kind of researching this and what it was, and kind of have a better understanding of myself. I went to the Heritage Project. So heritage.org. This is in no way a plug for them or anything like that. It was just on theirs, and they did an article. This was This was published in 2007, but it was talking about the birth of the administrative state, where it came from, and what it means for limited government. And it's about an hour-long read, but it's very interesting because they use different, like the SEC and the there was an incident with the Federal Water Service Corporation and a company. It was like Charney Corporation or something like that. Anyway, but it was talking about how the Charney this corporation tried to go out and buy stocks because this company was supposed to go public or whatnot. So this kind of started like how insider trading kind of a thing is what I got from it. But arbitrary government against the rule of law is one of the things it's like. So it's like all this thing. It's a good read, and it definitely helped me out trying to understand where did this administrative state come from. More importantly, how do changes be made in the administrative state? Yeah,
so I think that's ultimately where we're going. It's important to understand where it comes from, but I think and Larry Arnn from the president of president of Hillsdale College, gave a great little talk on it, which I really appreciated. He really broke it down very simply. But his solution was, first, understand the Constitution, understand our founding principles in a detailed way so that you can articulate it. Two, understand the administrative state. That's what we're doing tonight. We're trying to help people understand the administrative state, point them toward resources to help them to understand. And then to describe what they are doing, force these agencies and the people who represent them to tell the truth, force them to say what they're really saying. I thought that was pretty interesting. And I keep coming back to that as well. I've been saying that on a much more personal and lower level for a very long time. Force people to say what they really mean to say. Ask questions until they actually say what they're meaning to say. But I've heard a lot of different opinions on how to combat the administrative state. And I'll jump way forward and just say that one of the best solutions I've met was from a law professor called Peter. His last name is Hamburger. Let me just double check his name. Philip Hamburger. And he said, careful and thoughtful litigation, not necessarily big, not necessarily some huge class action lawsuit, but just very careful and targeted litigation.
Right.
That was his approach. Now, I think there's multi-prong attacks that need to happen. I would love to have an executive a president who is willing to push back the power of the state and the administrative state and try to curtail it. Here's the thing with that. The administrative state, these agencies are largely extensions of the executive branch. And it's very easy to use them for good or for ill, right? Again, who's good? So if I'm Donald Trump, well, I have all this power through these agencies to get my agenda through.
Right.
Perhaps, which actually I think one of his big issues was he was really fighting against the administrative state. But now if I'm Joe Biden, I've got a completely different agenda, but I still have all this power at my disposal. And so it's tended to grow despite what party was in power or what the views of the executive was over time. It's tended to grow.
Yeah.
And so that's difficult. Now, why would Congress stand for this? And to the audience, and Adam, of course, you, but to everybody, challenge me on this. I mean, ask questions and comments and stuff and say, you know what, you're jacked up. But why would Congress tolerate this? And I think it's not too far from the discussion from the point I just made about the executive branch. Okay, so I'm Congress, and let's just say that Congress has a collective will.
Okay.
And Congress has something that they think is a great idea. All right. I don't know what it might, but let's just go back to the Clean Air Act. All right. Congress thinks clean air is a great idea. Well, they know that they're going to have to delegate the details of this thing to an agency. But they don't want to pass legislation that's particularly clear because they want to delegate it down to an agency that has a lot of its own power.
Do they though?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So
that's where I can't. I look at this. What was the first question you asked? Was
why would Congress
allow this to happen? Right.
Yes, because bottom line, it can work in their interest as well. They can get around.
That's what if they leave it broad or vague,
right? Yes.
Then what happens is they can do back end deals with companies that they get kickbacks from, or this, that, and the other. Now, some of you are going to be like, Adam, you're crazy. Not according to my last psych eval. But it's you can't sit there if you think that this stuff. Oh, like, well, because the government, the people in the government would not do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Are you shitting me? Like this is the part that upsets me is when we're ignorant as a society to think that they're not going to use their power to put more money in their pockets. We've seen it over the last 70 years. It's happened. And it's happened on both sides of parties. It happens in politics, period. I don't care if you're red, if you're on the blue side, if you're down the middle. It doesn't matter. It happens with everybody.
Right.
Well, let me not that it happens with most politicians. I won't say everybody because I'm throwing the innocent in there as well, but it happens, and we've seen it. We've seen it even as recently as the last 10 years.
Oh, sure.
I've said this offline to you, John. I think Robin Williams once made a statement, and Robin was kind of left, but the comedian Robin Williams,
yeah,
once set up in a stand-up, I'll never forget it. He's like, I think politicians should wear NASCAR suits.
Yeah.
And that was so like, man, you don't even know how true that is.
Yeah, it is true. It is true. And so I heard I cannot remember the guy's name. He's a young guy. I'm trying to see if I've got it written down anywhere. I want to say his last name was Milan. At any rate, he was making a very good argument on a Jordan Peterson podcast that I saw a few weeks ago. It's a video. I saw it. I watched it on YouTube. But he was making a very good argument for basically 99%, the vast majority of our politicians being psychopaths that they the people who end up in those positions have a certain psychological makeup that allows them to be flexible and do what they need to do to get to a certain end. It was a very interesting talk. I took a lot away from it. Anyway, but the fact is that is how things happen. Very much so. I spent a lot of time in the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
It's how a lot of things get done.
Oh God, just to be a fly on the wall for a day.
Oh yeah.
In there.
Well, I'll give you one example, and this illustrates just a tiny bit of the power of the administrative state. So I was working at Headquarters Marine Corps after I retired. I was working at Headquarters Marine Corps Aviation as a graybeard, which is a old civilian, crusty civilian Marine that works there. And we have young majors and lieutenant colonels who come through there, and we're managing programs, strategic level stuff, like Joint Strike Fighter. You've got like a dude in charge of, Joint Strike Fighter F-18. In my case, it was H-1s. So, but one year we lost, I don't know, let's just say it was 10 aircraft out of our budget. And we went to Congress. We went to targeted certain congressional members, talked to their staffers, and we got back, I don't remember, but let's say we got back 5 airplanes. But we were committed that we really needed all of our aircraft. So we got with the manufacturer of the airplanes. Mm-hmm. We said, hey guys, this is what we've done on our side with Congress. We need you to engage with the Texas delegation. And they did. Some very powerful senators and congressmen down there. And before we knew it, we had all our airplanes back in the budget. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. We are talking about, hey, was I, as the person now in the administrative state at that time, was I working for the common good, or was I working in my own interests? Now, I can certainly tell you that in my mind, it was for a greater good, but my loyalty, I will be very frank with you, my loyalty was to the Marine Corps.
Right.
And that's, Well, we've talked about it before. I mean, the Marine Corps is like basically family.
Yeah.
It is to me, and most Marines are that way. But in that capacity, I was loyal to the Marine Corps. I wasn't necessarily thinking about the good of the greater.
No, you were thinking about
or even,
you were thinking about the Marines.
Yeah, or even the greater DoD, right? I would have viewed Army or Navy or anybody else who's making an attack on our money as as somebody trying to steal our money.
Right.
But very quickly getting back out of that little personal story, that's just one very, very small example of the way the administrative state works. Now, multiply that by 20 million other people working in the administrative state. And yes, some of them are secretaries, who can make a piece of paper go fast or slow, but never underestimate the power of a secretary.
They can also make a piece of paper disappear.
100%. Is that phone call going to get routed to the executive or the general officer?
Or is it going to get routed down to the mailroom?
Yep. I'd never, ever, always be friends with the secretary.
Yeah.
Or the aide or whoever is,
That's some great, that's some great advice right there.
I'm not kidding.
Always be friends with the secretary.
Always be friends with the secretary. Yeah. We had 2 secretaries that were the gatekeepers for our general officers at Headquarters Marine Corps. And if you were friends with them, you were much more likely to know when exactly he was coming back from lunch so that you could be there at the door to meet him and say, "Hey, sir, can I have 5 minutes of your time?" At any rate, but just one illustration, now multiply that times, 20 million or so folks exercising power.
So you have the administrative state, and then you have all of these other entities that fall under the administrative state.
Well, and I would roll that all up into the administrative state.
Right. Okay.
So if you have an EPA, you've got a mirror organization at every state level.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
So then you're not dealing with them from federal level. You're dealing it from, well, like you just said, every state, right? So every state has its own.
Yeah, and in certain states may have their own little. I don't know. God only knows what New York and New Jersey have dreamed up. I'm sure. I'm sure Maryland being right there, as being a extreme authoritative, totalitarian, comfortable with those ideas.
Yeah. Same with Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's the same way.
I'm sure they've dreamed up all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So go ahead.
One more quick point, and this is right to what I was just talking about. I love an exchange that was depicted in the miniseries John Adams, where John Adams and Thomas Jefferson have a little sort of good-hearted jab back and forth because they were close friends. But Thomas Jefferson said, "Sir, you have way too much faith in the goodness of government." And John Adams said, "And you, sir, have a dangerous faith in individuals." And they're both right.
Yeah.
But the fears of Madison is that, look, people tend to morph, and I want to make sure I get this right. I've got it written down. If people are in power, they tend to morph from the public good into factional issues that represent their own interests.
Right, exactly. So how do you stop that?
Well, so that's a very interesting question, which if you asked 50 people, you'd probably get 100 different answers. How do you stop it? And so I think this gets back to kind of my solution for everything that's wrong with the world is govern yourself.
Right.
Make sure that you understand why you believe what you believe. Fix yourself, fix your family, have a conversation with your neighbor, get involved in your local community on some level.
Right.
Take action in the world. And if you are acting in truth and with courage in the world, you will change it. And if you're acting with truth, in truth, you're not going to do anything bad. If you are acting in truth, you are not going to become a concentration camp guard. If you lie to yourself, This is what we were talking about a little bit earlier that I was kind of excited about, but I want to wrap my head around it a little more before I talk about it in too much detail. But if you lie to yourself,
right,
justify yourself, justify your actions to yourself incrementally, that's how a normal person becomes a concentration camp guard. Extreme example, but honestly, I think that's how you save the world. What does it have to do with the administrative state? Well, let's go back to the pandemic. And this is just one example. Let's go back to the pandemic about how everybody rolled over and our civil liberties died, not with a bang, not even with a whimper, but with kind of a, the sound that a whoopee cushion makes when all the air is out of it. I don't know what that sound is because it doesn't even make much of a sound. Right?
Yeah.
Nobody stood up. Nobody said, you know what? I'm out when they tell me to wear 4 masks. I'm out. Nobody refused to close. Well, people did, not enough. People refused to close their business. I was a little shocked by how quickly that happened. But that sort of action in the world, I think, is one of many pieces that would go into fighting back against the against the totalitarian rule that we have now by the administrative state. So this is not just me rattling on and railing against the administrative state and just saying, look, hey guys, it's bad. Do what I tell you to do or follow me. I think if we understand it, and man, we can't cover it all here. We cannot do it. But we have a fourth branch of government. We have a fourth branch. And it's not responsive to the electorate. It has, let's talk about this. It has greatly diminished oversight, scrutiny, and review. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about a case decided by the Supreme Court in 1984. It was Chevron versus, I think it was the EPA. Don't quote me. Actually, I've got it here someplace in some notes, but I don't want to take the time to look it up. The bottom line is that the finding has now become known in legal terms or legal parlance as the Chevron deference. The Chevron deference, meaning the Supreme Court decided that in this particular case, courts needed to defer to the expertise of the agency when it came to interpreting the details of the statute in question.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So here's why that is dangerous, and here's what that means. It's dangerous because now judges, there are Supreme Court precedents that is established that judges, when somebody does bring a lawsuit in the normal courts outside of the tribunal system within a particular agency, when somebody does bring up a lawsuit against, I'll just bang on, let's just say the Department of Labor. Let's go to another agency. I have a dispute. I bring a lawsuit against the Department of Labor, and it ends up in the court system. The courts now have to defer to, or are expected to defer to, the expertise and interpretation of that law that the agency brings to the table. So before the lawsuit even gets into the court, the judge is already acting and biased toward the agency. So you can't get a fair judicial hearing out of it. And that's just one piece. Adam, there's so much more. We've already talked about the issues with the executive and the great expansion of power that allows, and how it is contended to expand despite the party over the years because they can use it.
Right.
Same with Congress. Hey, I write a nice vague law. I can defer it down. That keeps the president from being able to put his fingers in it too much. So they're kind of happy too. It's pathological.
Let me ask you a question. By having
Yeah.
this administrative state, and you have all of these entities that fall under it, right? As you mentioned, I would think that senators and Congress people would love that. They love this, not only to fill their pockets, but if something if something goes wrong, or there's some unpopular measure of some sort, they're not held responsible for it.
Bingo, they are insulated. It's all right. Don't mean to get too excited, but no, freaking ding, 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 ding. They are insulated from the electoral system.
Right.
So political pressure does no good. You can call your senator till you're blue in the face. You can sign petitions with millions of signatures, and it does not make a hill of beans because your senator or your congressman is damn near powerless to really do much about whatever the agency has done. Now, he might be able to call a hearing or something like that, right? He might be able to do some congressional investigation or something, but in terms of having any real power, it's insulated. You can't say to the head of some agency, oh yeah, well, I'm not going to vote for you next time because nobody voted for him in the first place. It's insulated. It's once removed from the electorate. So it greatly diminishes with all the increases in suffrage we've had over the years. Women got the right to vote in, the 1920s somewhere. The black people got the right to vote back in the 1800s. Now they got it in fact, right. In law, they got it back then, but they got it in fact later on. And I guess we could probably debate when that actually happened, but let's just say the 1960s.
Right.
Black people got the right to vote, right? Greatly increased the ability to vote. But those same people have had their rights diminished by the rise of the administrative state because it dilutes power, because they legislate, because they execute, because they have judicial power in so many issues, so many matters that cut across the entirety of America. I mean, entirety of American life. So, okay, let's take property rights. Oh yeah, well, they can't touch me. I own my house and blah, blah. Oh yeah? How about property taxes? Try not paying your property taxes for a while and see what happens. Try going hunting, take a few deer and see what happens when you run across the DNR. The game warden.
Yeah.
Game warden. Just a couple of examples. Hey, see what happens if you decide, you know what? I'm not registering my car with the state to get a tag. That's stupid. It cost $800. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just try it. See what happens. So if anybody thinks that they've minimized the impact of the government, or maybe they think, I actually had a coworker one time say, I don't see any ways that the government's encroaching on my life. I'm like, dude, have you been alive? Did your children have any parents, or did your parents have any children that lived? Because if you've been alive and if your eyes have been open and if you have been not lying to yourself, then you should be able to see that, well, government touches almost everything I do. I can't get married without a marriage license. I can't go fishing without a fishing license in most places.
Right. It's almost,
et cetera, et cetera.
I'm biting my lip. It's almost like they're in control.
You think?
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Would it be wise for us then to kind of, I don't want to say get rid of the administrative state, but how do I say this? I guess what I'm asking is the administrative state be eliminated in means that we return to like a constitutional government and the separation of powers, that before anything takes effect, like any regulation or anything like that, it goes to the House and to the Senate to be voted on.
We could probably devise some scheme for that to happen. Now, okay,
because let me say this real quick. I think in doing this, you have, so you have the House, the Senate vote on it, and then it's passed by each of the two legislative branches, right? President signs off on it. You got a new thing, right? If we did it this way, then we can theoretically, I think you'd be able to hold those people accountable then.
Okay.
And then it would replace the you'd be able to hold them accountable, and you would start weeding out the, I'm air quoting, deep state types out of power.
So I would say you're 100% correct. Now, I'm going to reveal to you an old John Kerry tactic from my Pentagon days and those days when I was driving a desk. Okay. So let's say that the boss is a little bit of a micromanager and he wants to know everything, right?
Right.
Well, my response, meaning no real disrespect, but my response is, I will bury you. Okay. So stick with me here.
Okay.
By the time I'm done with about 2 days of sending all the the issues and stuff that I need adjudicated, guess who's done?
Yeah.
The boss.
Comes back, hey, I don't need these anymore.
All right. So now just take that little idea from a very small world and let's apply it to the administrative state and Congress. The administrative state is me. Congress is the boss. They will bury them. And Congress will never get the first thing done. All they'll do, one agency, one day would bury them in so much gunk that they would not be able to function. And so I think that would be over really quick. But you asked, your initial question was right on the money. How do we hold the administrative state accountable? How do we reduce this power that is not accountable to the people? Okay, so let's back up to the Constitution. If you are a constitutionalist, if you are somebody who actually cares what the Constitution actually says, not what you think it says, we're getting back to acting with courage and truth in the world and not lying to yourself about what the truth is. There is no place that sets out the administrative state. The administrative state grew out of interpretive constitutional reading out of the necessary and proper clause. So could you curtail it? Absolutely.
Right.
I think Philip Hamburger's analysis that well thought out, careful litigation by smart folks targeting the right decisions, targeting the right agencies at the right times, I think that is an exceedingly powerful tool. And when you get in litigation, you have to remind the judge and appeal to his or her idealistic, principled nature, which most of them are, regardless of where they fall on the scale, the political scale, left or right.
Right.
They all tend to be principled people, and appeal to that and say, look, this idea of deference, you cannot punt your independent judgment. You cannot punt your independent judgment here. You cannot just defer to the agency. You have got to decide on points of law. I think that is a great strategy. But there is no one silver bullet. There is no one thing that's going to curtail the state. I would love to see some folks that have gotten, maybe there's some attorneys out there who are super, super smart. And maybe they've just had it with the state and they want to, I say the deep state, and they want to bring a lawsuit, bring it on. Pool your resources with other like-minded attorneys and just do it. Take action with truth and courage in the world. However you might be able to do it. Maybe you were just the soccer mom who shows up at the school board meeting in Loudoun County, Virginia. Maybe that's your action in the world to fight back against an administrative state that is not,
helping,
acting, and actually the school board folks are elected, but this would be more of who's behind the school board ideas, the teachers unions and stuff like that, who are not elected. Just a couple of ideas.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say right now. You put a lot right there, and it was like, yeah, I mean, it's what do you do? And first and foremost, we need to start having these conversations with others, as hard as they might be for some, but we need to sit down and have these conversations, and then really first and foremost, or after that, you really need to start getting involved in your local politics and understand what's going on in the neighborhood, in your area, in your borough, town, city, and then out to the state, because it hits home at home first, and then it spreads out. We're looking at this. We look at things. It's so easy to look at things from a national level because, like, the federal law says this, and I think for years I used to say, the federal law says this, so the federal law can come in and shut the state down.
Yeah.
Is that true?
It depends on your point of view. It's like asking, is the administrative state really constitutional? So if you ask me, or you ask somebody like Richard Epstein of Chicago law, no.
If you look at our founding principles,
no.
The states are like the federal government is not supposed to come in and supersede the states.
Absolutely not. That's the Federalist idea that
right. That's what this country was founded on. The states have their own rules and regulations, as all of them do in certain situations. But what's happening right now is that the federal government is going in and saying yes or no to certain things that the states can and can't do. They're dictating basically what you can do in that state. I'll give you an example. By the time you guys listen to this, it'll be a couple of weeks out since it's happened. But this administration went down to Arizona to try to stop the counting of the re-election stuff.
The Maricopa audit.
Right. And I know several people personally that were involved in it, and they confirmed with what the news has been saying. Hey, there's literally tens of thousands of ballots that were here that shouldn't be, and this and that. So there's obviously something is going on. So if this administration has been talking so much about, oh well, they're just trying to say that this was a rigged election, this, that, and the other thing. If that was true, then there would be no reason for them to go to Arizona to try to stop anything.
100%. And this gets back to, and I honestly, I don't remember if this was a podcast conversation or a private conversation between us, but we were talking about several items, but one of them was the question of election fraud. And my ideas on it was, wow, hey, on December 5th, or I'm sorry, November 5th timeframe, some of this stuff started to come out, and there was a lot of crazy ideas being or statements being made and whatnot. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And that's pretty interesting. So it wasn't the response from the other side saying that, no, you guys are crazy. It was when discussion got completely shut down, when organizations started censoring any discussion about it, when uh, government began to get involved in shutting down the conversation, that's when I was like, well, there's your sign. You know?
The government has, I think what it all boils down to, folks, is that the government has far too much power than what they really need.
And much of it is exercised through unelected officials.
And we're the ones that elect those officials. Well, we're
The ones we are that are
we're
elected.
supposed to be the ones to elect those officials.
Yeah. Oh,
yes.
This predicament that we are in, and I'll just take the administrative state, the topic at hand. It's our fault.
Yeah.
It's our fault. It's like Benjamin Franklin said when he came out of the Constitution of Congress and was asked what kind of government we had. He said, "We got a republic, madam, if you can keep it. If you can keep it."
Just one day, I'd like to sit in like a lawn chair or something, and just watch the founders come back and just talk to everybody about this was not what we, or just hear what they have to say about what's going on. I'll put it that way. I don't want to assume what they would say.
I think that would be very, very interesting. Somebody asked me on a podcast one time if I could have dinner with one individual from history, who would it be? And it would be George Washington, is what I answered.
Yeah.
Not because he's just the first guy who came to mind, but I've actually thought about this, and I would just love to hear what he thinks about what's going on now. And he just seemed like he would be a cool guy to hang out with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He just seemed like he'd be a cool guy to hang out with.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be, that'd be a good one. That'd definitely be a good one.
Yeah. There was a lot of them.
What else do we want to tell everybody about, or what to look for with the administrative state?
Well, I would say I would love to talk for about 2 more hours, but I would say that the rule of law loses when we talk about the administrative state. The rule of law, one of the founding principles, it loses. And it doesn't always lose in the big things. It doesn't always lose in the Chevron cases, like we outlined very briefly. It loses in the little things. It loses when people just decide they're not going to fight back. It loses when people allow, an agency to bully them into, paying a fine over something that was perhaps unjust. But the rule of law loses. And so I'd kind of like for folks to think about that. That's one. 2, there are actions we can take with truth and courage in the world that will curtail that power that is insulated from the electorate and begin to at least change the balance a bit. And you know what? I would love to see more normal people run for office at every level. I would love to see soccer moms and baseball coach dads and stuff running for national and state and local positions, where normal people who don't have a sponsor necessarily can be in those offices. And whether I agree with them or not, they can act hopefully with truth and courage in the world to bring about a better America.
And some dignity. It's funny. I just saw that more and more veterans are starting to get into politics, I think.
Yeah.
Recently. And I think that's a good thing. But, John, all good points with administrative state. And this one was, I don't know, there's a lot to this one.
And it's a difficult subject no matter what.
There's really, really, it's like overwhelmingly, when I started researching this stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, there's a lot to this. But when you dig into it, I guarantee you, your mind is going to start, the wheels are going to start turning, and you're like, oh, okay, I understand that, or oh, I see that. And you're probably going to read some stuff that might even piss you off.
I guarantee you that most Americans would read quite a bit that would piss them off. So the one last thing, and I know we're about to wrap up, one last thing I would say that we come back to almost every time. We always come back to this concept of the individual and the truth. But I would say that, look, this is not rocket surgery, right? Just take a little bit of time and educate yourself on the founding principles, and educate yourself a little bit on what is happening with the administrative state. I'll guarantee you, if you do a little bit of searching on YouTube, you can find some really good, comprehensive lectures. And within a couple of hours, you can have a pretty darn good understanding of the Constitution, how it should be applied, and of the administrative state and what has gone awry in the administrative state. So that's my encouragement that I'll close with.
I love it. John, as always, thank you. I appreciate you being on here, and I'm glad that we're doing and talking about these discussions that really needs to be discussed, and we got to start getting more and more people talking about it. But John, before we let you go, I want you to tell everybody. First off, I'll say, folks, John has a company called Simper Savage, and they make the best marinades and salad dressings that your taste buds will ever experience. And I'm speaking from experience, because if you go downstairs into our pantry or in our refrigerator, that is all that we carry now in this house for that stuff. So, John, where can people find your delicious salad dressing marinades?
If you want to get you some of the best marinade and salad dressing on the planet, go to www.sempersavage.com. Buy yourself a 2-pack or a 4-pack. We got 4 varieties. We got Savage Centurion red wine vinaigrette, Savage balsamic vinaigrette, Savage Caesar, Hail Caesar, and Savage cider, apple cider vinaigrette. You're going to love it. We are veteran-owned and family-operated. My wife, Stacy, and I do all the work ourselves.
Yep.
And so that's homemade salad dressing in a bottle, salad dressing and marinade in a bottle, and you're going to love it.
Check it out, guys. Seriously, you got to check it out. Also, got to give props to our parent company, Heroes Media Group. They're doing a bunch of things over there. Check out all the new shows that are coming up over there on the network. Check out the website, heroesmediagroup.com. If you would like to become part of the HMG family in some form or fashion, you can reach out to them through the website. Again, that is www.heroesmediagroup.com. Thanks for tuning in this week. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.